Hi, I'm Steve Okun, Senior Advisor with McLarty Associates. And on behalf of AmChams of Asia Pacific and our summit, I want to welcome David Marchick to joining us. On February 2nd, the Biden-Harris administration announced Dave as the U.S. International Development Finance Corporation's Chief Operating Officer. In this role, he manages policies, oversees business operations, and coordinates strategies and priorities for the DFC. Prior to joining the DFC, Dave served as the director of the nonprofit, nonpartisan Center for Presidential Transition, where he worked with the Biden transition team, senior officials in the White House, and engaged with more than 100 federal agencies on transition planning efforts. Dave is no stranger to Asia. He spent 12 years at the Carlyle Group as managing director and as a member of Carlyle's management committee. He launched Carlyle's sustainability initiatives and helped drive both the firm's and the industry's diversity efforts. Dave also held several positions within the Clinton administration, including Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for Transportation Affairs, where he negotiated a landmark U.S.-China Air Services Agreement. Dave, I'm really glad to have you join us. You know, a recent article in Foreign Affairs described the DFC as a potential powerhouse. Can you give us the background on DFC, its mission and strategy to carry that out?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Steve. And it's great to see you. We've been friends for almost 30 years from the Clinton administration, although you've aged a lot better than I have. So that makes me a little jealous and angry. So I saw that article this morning, actually. Gail Smith, the former USAID administrator in the Obama administration, wrote a wonderful article basically describing how the DFC can be a powerhouse tool for both foreign policy and development policy. A couple of years ago, the Congress reauthorized or essentially created the Development Finance Corporation, expanding OPIC's authority, expanding its reach, and essentially doubling its size from 30 billion of AUM to 60 billion. It also gave the DFC authority to invest in equity and to do much more in terms of technical assistance. So it's a really extraordinary agency with phenomenal career professionals. I've been there for a month now, and I'm just blown away by the quality of the team. And we can do just a variety of activities, from loans to direct equity, to fund investments, to political risk and other types of insurance, to technical assistance, to help drive private sector growth around the world in developing countries, and to help expand America's reach through private sector activity and essentially non-coercive development, which is a very powerful tool to drive sustainable growth.
Well, maybe let's start with the broader question first. So how does this fit within the broader Biden-Harris administration approach to foreign policy, and in particular approach to Asia Pacific and our region here in Southeast Asia?
So President Biden recently said that when he talked about economic development and our development strategy, that he basically said that it creates new markets for products and reduces the likelihood of instability, violence, and mass migration. So what we do as America's development bank is essentially a very, very powerful tool for economic development and our foreign policy. And Asia, the Indo-Pacific, it's just a huge priority for us. It's perhaps one of the top priorities for our activity. We want to significantly expand our presence. We've already started working with ASEAN countries. We're very active in India. We can get into the numbers, but it's a very, very powerful tool to help those countries drive development, economic growth, and to move up the income stream, to earn more money, to have better livelihoods, to have more secure futures, to have better healthcare. And that's a very, very powerful tool for the United States of America.
You know, you mentioned healthcare, because most people, when they think of development and development agencies, you think of infrastructure. I mean, bridges, roads, ports, or even electricity and water. But are you going beyond that now? Are you going to look at different sectors beyond the infrastructure and energy sector?
We are. I mean, our priorities include climate, and we define climate very broadly, not just mitigation strategies, which is what people think of in terms of wind farms and solar and other non-carbon infrastructure, but also adaptation. So there's a huge amount of work that we can do and we can support to help countries around the world deal with the impact of climate change, not just to reduce carbon emissions, but to help them deal with the impact of typhoons, of floods, of rising seas, of droughts, and to help create more sustainable and more resilient futures for countries around the world because of the devastating impact of climate change. We also want to do much more in health. So it's amazing, Steve, that as I look at our portfolio has about 3% of our total exposure is in health. And health should be, a much larger segment of our activity. So right now, obviously, the number one issue for the entire world is the pandemic. And we can do innovative work to help both hopefully accelerate manufacturing and distribution of vaccines, but also help create more secure distribution. So for example, we're active in negotiations with an insurance company to essentially provide leverage to help them ensure the distribution of vaccines to developing countries so that if something goes wrong for a shipper or someone else in that supply chain, the cold storage breaks, or there's a problem with the syringes, that they have adequate insurance, and that way they have much more confidence to get involved in the distribution activity. And so we're also very focused on expanding diagnostics, expanding rural health, and helping countries all over the developing world have more secure healthcare systems to help their people.
You mentioned, insurance companies, because again, traditionally, when you think of DFC, you think of, its predecessor, OPIC, you think of working with, private equity funds, infrastructure funds. We're an audience, for this event of hundreds of business leaders from across the Asia Pacific region. How can different businesses beyond the finance sector work with DFC in its new capacity?
So we're a different agency. We're essentially a bank, a development bank. And so if you look at our exposure in Asia, we have about $5 billion of exposure across Asia, 5.4. In the ASEAN countries, it's a little less than $1 billion. And in India, it's around 2.5 billion. Actually, India is our largest single country exposure. We want to continue to grow that pie. Now, how do we do that? Unlike other types of foreign assistance where they're grants or they're partnering with nonprofits or NGOs, we need a private sector partner. So we need to find projects which we can lend to, provide insurance for, invest in, or provide technical assistance to them. And so the way that we do that is to have a very large pipeline. We may look at 30, 40, 75 possible transactions for every bankable transaction. And so the broader the pipeline we can develop, the more that we can do. So what can your members do? They can work with the DFC to identify bankable projects, basically projects that meet our criteria. They're in the countries where we want to be active, that have a huge development impact, that are in the sectors we want to pursue. And the broader the pipeline, the more we can do. And so for all of your members, if they're active in the ASEAN countries, in India, in other parts of the Indo-Pacific, and they need financing, please have them call us. We do have people on the ground in Thailand, in Singapore, in India, and soon to be Indonesia. But you can talk to the embassies, you can talk to the consulates, and we have relationships with all of the embassies and consulates so that if there's a project that someone brings them, they can connect with us, and then we can connect with the private sector potential partner. So the more you can do, the better.
Well, the theme for this event is transformation, and we're talking a lot about resilience, and that's certainly what you're leading back in Washington. We look forward to working with you as you do all of that exciting development, and we want to be a part of that, and we welcome being a part of that. I know this is your first speech to a group like us since you've been appointed to this position by the president. So thank you for joining us. Any closing thoughts for us?
I'm very excited to do more in Asia. I've spent a lot of my life there. And once the pandemic is over, I look forward to coming and seeing you and seeing all of your